for the former president to be maintaining sort of covert communications with an authoritarian leader who is at war with a US ally whilst out of office is pretty extraordinary.
But here's a question. This relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, what do you think of it? Is it very close? Is it too close?
I would get him into a room, I'd get Zelensky into a room, then I'd bring them together and I'd have a deal worked out. I would get a deal worked out. It would have been a lot easier before it started. Essentially for 4 years, I kept them from doing anything. Because you know what, I will tell you this, I've never said this, Ukraine was the apple of his eye.
Well, that's Donald Trump talking in very familiar terms about the Russian leader. Now, there's now a new book which is going to get a lot of attention. It's written by the respected journalist, veteran commentator Bob Woodward, who talks about the president, he says, having had as many as 7 phone calls with Vladimir Putin since he left the White House in 2021. One of those, he sent a staffer out of the room for a private conversation. Also, talk of him having sent President Putin COVID tests and having done so secretly. Putin, according to Bob Woodward's account, said you better do that on the quiet because people won't like it. But he sent those tests. What does it tell us about the relationship? It's certainly going to cause interest. Hugh Tomlinson's joined us on the line, Washington reporter for The Times. Hello, Hugh.
Hi, John. How are you?
Well, thanks for joining us. Interesting stuff again from Bob Woodward.
Yeah, absolutely. And 4 weeks to go in this election campaign, the October surprises keep coming. This one, as you said, is going to has already got a lot of attention, and I imagine there'll be even more when the book is out next week. But as you said, the account of these covert phone calls between Trump and Vladimir Putin certainly making headlines this morning.
What's your take on it? And it's a regular feature of that political debate in America, the relationship between Putin and Trump. We just played a bit of a past conversation where Trump's talking about Ukraine, makes no secret of the fact that he wants to bring an end to that war. By implication, not even by implication, pretty clearly by getting concessions from Ukraine, which I guess by definition means giving Putin some, at least, maybe quite a lot of what he hopes to get. I mean, how big an issue is that in this election for many Americans who do kind of put foreign affairs in a box on the side?
Well, they do, but I think, as Woodward says himself in the book, in the excerpts of the book that we've seen, that for the former president to be maintaining sort of covert communications with an authoritarian leader who is at war with a US ally whilst out of office is pretty extraordinary. As you say, Trump has repeatedly bragged in office and since he left the White House about his good relationship with Vladimir Putin, has claimed that Ukraine would never have been invaded if he were president. No way of proving that. But it certainly plays into Trump's rival for the White House, Kamala Harris's argument that Trump is in hoc to America's adversaries, and that Trump's plan to resolve the war in Ukraine would essentially amount to a Ukrainian surrender.
Well, I'm going to talk in a minute about Kamala Harris, who's given this interview for 60 minutes, and what that says about her, what it didn't say about her. But just another thought on Donald Trump, because we've been reporting on the coming Hurricane Milton, just a couple of weeks right after Hurricane Helene. And Donald Trump has been saying again and again that Joe Biden is to blame for not sending hurricane aid, emergency aid to those states that have been hit by the hurricane. But it's not true. It's demonstrably untrue. And it's been contradicted by senior Republican politicians. How does that fact play there now, Hugh?
Well, it's hard to say. The polls, as you know, are extremely close at the moment, and it's a question of messaging. The fact is that Trump's lies, and they are flat out lies in this instance about the government's response to Hurricane Helene, reaches audience very, very quickly. It's the federal government, the Biden administration, is much less nimble in responding to these and putting its message out. Biden and Harris have both made statements denouncing Trump's claims that the money for disaster relief has been routed into housing migrants, or taking care of undocumented migrants. But the simple fact is the millions of people in this country believe it.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to keep on talking about where we are with the American election, which keeps on barreling along. Kamala Harris has been very busy on the airways just now, but Hugh Tomlinson in the US for the Times. Thank you so much for joining us.
Both the comments are about the book on Trump and, undermining US foreign policy by having secret conversations with the dictator of a country that is at war with a US ally, both that and the just lying about the sort of disaster relief. We're kind of shrugging. Like, obviously that's a massive deal, but it's also kind of what we've come to expect from Trump. And I think less than, 3 weeks before an election, that's really priced in. So I don't think this stuff is it's interesting to talk about from a how did we get here and what might it mean for US politics in the future, but I don't think it's going to be particularly relevant to moving the electoral dial because, as Tim said, they know what Trump is. I struggle to see how anyone can separate the platform and the character when the character is so much of a risk to sort of the fundamentals of American democracy and American foreign policy, and the idea that Trump could side with or is siding with the dictator of a country that's at war with America, that he could try and pull America out of NATO and destabilise the foreign policy apparatus that has kind of kept the world safe since the Cold War. Obviously, there's a point about other countries paying their way and European governments investing in their defence, and that's very valid. But the idea that you think that the world would be safer with Trump in the White House for a second term versus somebody whose policies you may or may not like, I just don't see it. And I don't see as well you did a very good job, Tim, of sort of outlining all the problems with America at the moment. Did educational outcomes for low-income black children improve during Trump's first presidency? I don't think so. I think that there's you're nodding at me. Inner city black kids did better under Trump.
They didn't improve in places like Illinois, which the Democrats control. But what did I forget the name of the education secretary? Betsy is coming to my mind. I'm not sure it was Betsy, but she was a big funder of the voucher program. And what happened under Trump was that lots of Republican, particularly states or Republican cities that were open to receiving vouchers for minority kids did get those vouchers. And so actually, where the Republican Party could bypass, where the White House could bypass the Democratic control of so many inner cities, actually the life chances of black kids, minority kids, kids in did actually improve. But I wanted to particularly take issue with you. We could be here all the evening taking issue. But the world has got a lot less safe under this administration, Biden-Harris administration. The Afghan withdrawal, the failure to really fund Ukraine properly, the sort of flip-flopping really on Israel. If you are an ally of America at the moment, whether you were the women of Afghanistan, whether you are Zelensky in Ukraine, whether you are Netanyahu, you do not see America as a reliable ally now. All of this insecurity, I would say, coming from the basic weakness of the Biden-Harris position, that's what happened under this administration. Now, I can absolutely sign up and we would tick boxes on a number of weaknesses of Trump, and I think it's disgraceful, his position on Ukraine now. But would I actually think that the world would be less safe with Trump in charge? I think, the madmen, if you want to say it pejoratively, the idea that you do not know what he's going to do, I think potentially would have deterred a lot of foreign leaders from doing things that they felt that they could do under someone that was as safe and sort of predictable as Biden. So it's far from obvious to me that the world would be more dangerous if we'd had Trump in the White House for another 4 years.
But allowing put it to you then, for the sake of this bit of the discussion, allowing Vladimir Putin's aggression to pay off, because coming into office and saying, right, you're going to come to the table, and Trump frames it not in precisely that way. He says he banged their heads together. Tell Putin, if you do not come to the table, well, then I'll pour arms into the possession of Zelensky. And Zelensky, if you don't do the same, I'm just going to stop supplying you. They'll come to the table and do a deal. But a deal, by definition, in those circumstances, means concessions to Putin. And if that's what happens, doesn't that make Putin more dangerous? Doesn't it encourage what he's doing?
This is a rhetorical question to you, John, because I know you don't. You're the interviewer rather than etc. But Putin is an evil. I would use a swear word if we weren't on a family radio station. I have absolute contempt for what he did. I particularly remember a report done by the BBC where a mother in a village that had been razed to the ground by Russian troops her son had been killed, and she was in her house crying while the Russian soldiers who'd murdered her son celebrated outside, stripping them. He is evil. How do we get out of this situation, though? How many more young Ukrainian lives are going to be taken, maimed by this process? The thought of giving Putin any concessions makes me sick. But I see no end to this war without some change in the rules of the game. And I think it's going to make us all sick, and we will have to punish Putin for years afterwards to somehow keep him in his cage. But this situation where tens of thousands of people, sons of Russian mums, sons of Ukrainian mums, are being lost. It cannot go on. Right. And I see no solution from Harris-Biden to this problem.
Why don't we close this bit of the chat on that point and move on and talk about Kamala Harris, because she gave an interview to the much respected 60 Minutes TV programme interviewed by Bill Whitaker. It was a proper interview. It was genuinely testing. It was polite, it was courteous, but it was definitely testing. And there were many things where tests were laid out. One of them was on Kamala Harris describing herself as a gun owner, and a lot of heat from the other side of the aisle saying, "I just don't believe she's a gun owner." And Bill Whitaker took her up on that.
I have a Glock, and I've had it for quite some time. And I mean, look, Bill, my background is in law enforcement, and so there you go.
Have you ever fired it?
Yes, of course I have. At a shooting range. Yes, of course I have.
So ending with a chuckle. It's not going to convince those who believe that she's making it up, but equally, our own David Charter in the Times was suggesting that she did okay there. Came across as more human. There was less of the sort of word salad answers. And Tim, she did, I suppose, do that interview. Donald Trump's refused to do 60 Minutes. He says doesn't want to be fact checked, which is a curious approach to an interview. But he says he doesn't want to be fact checked. Are you any less critical?
No, I think it's good that she's done a few more interviews. I think I've been on this programme before criticising the fact that she hasn't done any. At least she's done some. But I do think actually they confirmed my suspicion of her. There was one question that was put to her about how many flip-flops she'd done on everything from fracking to whatever. And she came with a sort of word salad, to use the expression that's been used quite accurately of, how she taught a word salad of an answer. Well, I've seen the different parts of America and they're all, we need to have a compromise. And it was just a load of waffle. And my problem, though, is if she was just a waffly president, waffly person, and I would probably, accept her as a good president. The thing is, I think she has a secret agenda. I think she's a Californian liberal who would change America in quite some radical ways, which is why I don't think she's worth the risk.
What do you make of that?
Donald Trump has love letters to Kim Jong-un. That's what I make of that. I know I've mentioned the double standard before. He's talked about love letters and falling in love with Kim Jong-un. This is a dictator in North Korea. If he didn't have a close enough relationship with Putin, I know we're meant to be talking about Kamala Harris, and I'll talk about her in a moment. But I do find
we can't help ourselves.
None of us can. But I find I've called it double standard before, and that's not entirely fair. But just the difference in the way that basically any politician, Republicans as well, other than Donald Trump and Donald Trump are discussed. Like Donald Trump flip-flops constantly, often within the same speech, often within the same sentence.
It is pointed out, Rachel.
And I know it's pointed out, but then Tim says, Kamala Harris does it, and you're like, yes, but can we just talk about sort of the context? Like, one of them waffles and occasionally flip-flops, and one of them, the sentence, you never know where it's going to end, and sometimes it can end with a declaration of love for one of America's enemies. It's a category error.
Anthony Blair joins us, senior reporter for The Sun in New York. Hello to you, Anthony.
Hi there.
Hi. Well, interesting stuff. Bob Woodward tends to turn up interesting stuff, and here's some more.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it remains to be seen whether these revelations are going to have any sort of serious impact on the election campaign. We're all expecting some kind of October surprise, of course. But I think what's so interesting about these revelations is the tone, which really seems to be that Putin is the one coming to Trump for advice. Putin is the one who seems worried about their sort of the extent of their conversations being revealed. And Trump seems to be almost quite gung-ho. At one point he says, I don't care. And obviously this bizarre revelation that he delivered COVID testing machines to Putin as well. It truly is strange stuff.
I mean, it will just feed the argument that's been going on for so long now about the closeness of that relationship and whether or not Donald Trump is actually in thrall to the Russian leader.
Yes, and I think it remains to be seen whether the Harris campaign will try and use this in any way to sort of damage Trump. Obviously, 8 years ago, we saw with Hillary Clinton, this sort of the Russia angle, the Russiagate angle was used very strongly against Trump. It didn't really seem to have any impact whatsoever. So I think if Harris's campaign does go for this angle, they will probably have to try a different tactic to that used by Clinton 8 years ago.
Right. Okay. Well, it's part of the story. It's part of the campaign. We know that already, and I guess this will add some more fuel to that. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris has given a big interview to the popular TV interview program, respected again, 60 Minutes. Let's have a quick listen back. She was asked by the journalist Bill Whittaker, at one point, what kind of gun she owns.
I have a Glock, and I've had it for quite some time. And I mean, look, Bill, my background is in law enforcement. And so there you go.
Have you ever fired it?
Yes. Of course I have. At a shooting range. Yes, of course I have.
So Kamala Harris sounding relaxed there. There's been an argument, a Republican critic suggesting it was made up that she had a gun at all. And Harris appeared also on the Millennial podcast, Call Her Daddy.
How are you going to help young people not feel left behind?
First of all, it's a very real issue, and we need to take it seriously. And I do take it very seriously. So there are a number of issues that contribute to that feeling. One is housing is too expensive, and we need to increase the housing supply. So part of my plan is to work with home builders in the private sector to build, by the end of my first term, 3 million more housing units.
Well, so just two appearances. She's also appeared today on The View, which is a female panel show, and she's due to be interviewed by Howard Stern and to appear with Stephen Colbert on his show too. So what do you make of all of this, Anthony Blair? I guess she's can't be called shy of publicity at the moment.
I mean, that's true, and she's obviously received a lot of criticism recently for maybe dodging a lot of more mainstream media appearances. But at the same time, one could argue that she's going for places that she expects maybe a little bit of an easier ride. Obviously, Colbert, a comedy late night show. Howard Stern, seen as maybe more sympathetic to the Democrats, although he is friends with Donald Trump. But it's sort of interesting that she maybe might be seen as going on something that's a little bit more conversational, like going on this podcast, Call Her Daddy, is something that's like maybe a little bit less of a traditional media appearance, less of a traditional grilling, more of a conversational style that possibly her advisors feel that she can maybe get her points across better.
And I guess a contrast with Donald Trump, who has refused to go on 60 Minutes. Bill Whittaker is a respected interviewer, as we say. One of his concerns was he didn't want fact-checking. But, of course, in an interview, a proper interview, fact-checking is what goes with the territory.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, Trump is, famously his sort of media appearances in the past have been pretty bombastic and maybe running roughshod with the truth slightly. I mean, he's obviously famous for his appearances on the Howard Stern show as well. And has made a great deal of controversial comments in the past on that. So I think it's, as we approach the final weeks of the campaign, I think both candidates are just so nervous of making any kind of major slip up that is going to completely upend the campaign, that they're just trying to keep these appearances as controlled as possible. And
we were talking earlier on, about the facts and the truth, talking about Hurricane Helene. And it's true that in various platform appearances, Donald Trump is saying that the White House is denying aid to those states that are affected by Hurricane Helene. But that's simply just not true. And it's been denied, hasn't it, by Republican governors and mayors and senators.
No, absolutely. It isn't true. And, again, it's seen as maybe part of Trump's attempt to kind of tie the Harris-Biden administration to this disaster, particularly as it affects three of the most crucial sort of swing states in this election, and that is Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina.
All right. We're Anthony Blair at The Sun, US in New York. Thank you.